You are sitting in a room that smells like old leather and certainty. There is no noise coming from outside. There is no notification on your phone that makes you anxious. The attorney across from you is sliding a document across the desk. And at the top of that document is not your name. It is your great-great-grandfather's name, a man who died in 1931. And yet here you are, in the year 2024, signing papers that confirm you are the sixth person in your bloodline to inherit a structure he built from almost nothing. A structure that has never once collapsed, never once been sold off, never once been divided and spent into dust the way most family fortunes are. The number on the document is $460 million. You didn't earn it. But someone in your family did something so deliberate, so architecturally intentional, that it survived 2 world wars, the Great Depression, multiple stock market crashes, and 6 generations of human beings, who could have destroyed it at any point, but couldn't, because the structure wouldn't allow them to. Now here is the question that should be sitting uncomfortably in your mind right now. Why does that family still have everything, and why does yours have almost nothing left to pass down? That question is exactly what this video is going to answer. And I need you to stay with me until the very end. Because the most important part of what I'm about to share with you is not at the beginning. It is buried in the middle and the end, where most people stop watching. So if you leave early, you are going to miss the exact piece that changes everything. Let's start with a truth that nobody in the personal finance world likes to say out loud. Building wealth and building a legacy are 2 completely different things. Most people spend their entire lives chasing the first one and never once think about the second. And here is why that is such a quiet tragedy. Because the wealth, without the structure, disappears. It always disappears. Not dramatically, not in one catastrophic moment, but slowly in increments, each one with a perfectly reasonable explanation attached to it. You know this story. Maybe you've lived part of it. Someone in a family builds something real. A business, a portfolio, a piece of property worth something. And then they die without a plan. And within 15 years that thing is gone. Split between relatives who didn't agree. Sold to cover estate taxes. Spent down by a generation that never learned to hold what they were given. The statistics on this are brutal and almost nobody talks about them. 70% of wealthy families lose their entire wealth by the second generation. 90% lose it by the third. 90%. Meaning that out of every 10 families who accumulate real money in this country, 9 of them watch it completely vanish within 60 years. And the 10th family, the one that doesn't lose it, didn't get lucky. They built something different from the very beginning. That is what you are going to understand by the end of this video. And more importantly, that is what you are going to know how to start building yourself. Here is where I want you to do something for me. I want you to stop thinking about money the way you were taught to think about it. Most of us were raised to think about money in terms of income, how much comes in, how much goes out, and whether there is anything left at the end of the month. That framework is not wrong exactly, but it is dangerously small for what we are talking about today. Because income is personal. Income lives and dies with the person earning it. The moment you stop working, the income stops. And if that income is all your family has, then the moment you are gone, so is everything you built. The families that last 7 generations are not thinking about income. They are thinking about entities. They are thinking about structures that exist independently of any one person. Structures that generate, protect, and transfer wealth regardless of who is alive to manage them at any given moment. Think about what that means in real terms. When you hold a property in your own name and you die, that property goes through probate, gets split according to a will that may or may not reflect your actual wishes, gets taxed at the estate level, and often gets sold just to divide the proceeds fairly among your heirs. The asset disappears. The cash gets distributed. The cash gets spent. The family is back to zero within a decade. But when that same property is held inside a properly structured family trust or a multi-generational holding entity, something completely different happens. The asset does not pass through probate. There is no forced sale. The tax exposure is dramatically reduced, or in some structures entirely eliminated. And most importantly, the asset keeps working, generating income, appreciating in value, serving as collateral for the next acquisition, for the people who come after you. Your children inherit not a check that they will spend, but a system that will continue to produce. And their children inherit the same system, and their children after them. That is the difference between leaving money and leaving a machine. Now I want to walk you through what this actually looks like across 7 generations, because this is where it gets real. And this is the part that most videos on this topic never show you. Generation 1, that is you. You are the founder. You are the person sitting at the beginning of this timeline with nothing but the decision about what kind of family you are going to create. At this stage, you are not worried about the fourth generation or the seventh. You are making 3 decisions that will determine whether any of this works at all. The first decision is the asset decision. You are identifying assets that do not just appreciate, but that generate income perpetually. Real estate that collects rent, businesses that produce cash flow, ownership stakes in infrastructure, in toll roads, in utilities, in anything that the world pays for every single month regardless of what the economy is doing. Not speculative bets, not things that go up for a decade and then evaporate. Permanent income, assets that, in the words of the families who have held them across generations, cannot be stopped. The second decision is the structure decision. Before your wealth grows to a level where this feels urgent, you are placing these assets inside legal containers, trusts, family LLCs, holding companies that separate the asset from the person. This is the single most overlooked step in every conversation about building wealth, and it is the one that determines whether what you build survives past your own lifetime. The third decision is the most uncomfortable one, and I need you to sit with it for a moment, because this is the decision that almost nobody makes, and it is also the decision that separates every dynasty from every footnote in history. You are deciding right now that you will not sell. That sounds simple. It is not simple at all, because everything around you, every financial advisor, every market fluctuation, every life event, every moment of pressure is going to tell you to sell. Take the profit, realize the gain, move the money somewhere else, and the logic will always sound reasonable. The offer will always look attractive. The tax will always feel manageable in the moment. But here is what the families who last 7 generations understand about selling that most people never figure out in an entire lifetime of managing money. Every time you sell an asset that is working, you are not just moving money from one place to another. You are permanently ending that asset's ability to compound. You are triggering a tax event that destroys a portion of everything that asset produced. And you are trading a permanent claim on the world's productive output for a temporary pile of cash that will be taxed when it arrives, spent while it sits, and never again capable of becoming what the asset would have become if you had simply held it. The families that built lasting wealth do not sell because they figured out that selling is the worst thing you can ever do with something that is working. They borrow against it instead. They extract liquidity without triggering the event that reduces the wealth. They pay interest rates lower than the asset's yield and keep the difference. They let the asset keep compounding while the borrowed capital funds the next acquisition. And they repeat this structure across decades, and then across generations, until the machine is so large and so deeply embedded in legal structures that no single person, no market crash, no bad decision by a grieving heir, can take it apart quickly enough to destroy it. That is the architecture of a dynasty, and you are only halfway through understanding it. Now here is where most people stop thinking, and where the families that last 7 generations never stop thinking. Because building the structure is only half of what keeps a dynasty alive. The other half is something far more human, far more fragile, and far more difficult to architect than any trust document or holding company ever will be. It is the people inside the structure. You can build the most legally airtight, tax-efficient, multi-generational wealth vehicle that has ever existed, and a single generation of financially uneducated heirs can find a way to dismantle it from the inside. Not through one catastrophic decision, but through dozens of small, individually reasonable ones. The lifestyle that quietly triples the cost of living. The family member who needs a loan that never becomes a repayment. The investment that felt right because someone trusted the wrong person. The asset sold because the heir never understood what it actually represented. This is not a hypothetical. This is the story of nearly every fortune that has ever disappeared. And if you are building something meant to last 175 years, you need to understand that the legal structure protects the wealth from the outside world. But the family culture is what protects the wealth from the family itself. So let's talk about what generation 2 looks like when you build this correctly. Because this is where most legacies die, and where yours is going to be different. Your children are growing up inside something they did not build. They did not sit in the room where the first trust was signed. They did not make the decision not to sell when every instinct said sell. They inherited a structure they did not choose. And if you have not done the work to make them understand why that structure exists and what it represents, they will treat it the way most people treat inherited things, as something to be used rather than something to be maintained. The families that survive generation 2 do something that most wealthy Parents never do. They educate their heirs before they transfer anything. Not just financial education in the abstract sense. Not just teaching kids about compound interest and index funds, but deeply specific education about the family's actual assets, the structures they sit inside, and the philosophy that built them. The Rockefeller family famously created what they called family meetings, not holiday gatherings, but structured educational sessions where every member of the family, regardless of age, was taught the mechanics of the wealth, the obligations that came with it, and the values that were expected to govern every decision made with it. That is not a financial decision. That is a cultural one, and it is the most important investment you will ever make in the longevity of everything you are building. By the time you reach Generation 3, something interesting begins to happen, and this is the generation that the statistics say destroys everything. So I need you to pay very close attention here. Generation 3 is the first generation with no living memory of scarcity. Your grandchildren will not remember the version of you that was building this from nothing. They will not remember the discipline, the delayed gratification, the years of structuring and deciding, and holding when it would have been so much easier to sell. They will only ever know the version of the family that already has everything. And that psychological distance from the origin of the wealth is exactly what makes Generation 3 so dangerous. The families that protect against this do not rely on the grandchildren simply inheriting the right values by proximity. They build the values into the legal structure itself. Family constitutions, governance documents that specify how decisions about the wealth are made, who has voting rights, what requires unanimous consent, what no single individual can do without the agreement of a family council, distribution rules that tie access to capital to demonstrated financial competence, educational requirements built into the trust documents themselves, not as a punishment, but as a protection. A protection for the wealth, yes, but more importantly, a protection for the heir, who deserves to receive something they are equipped to steward rather than something that will quietly overwhelm them. This is what John D. Rockefeller understood that almost no one else in his generation thought about. He was not just distributing assets. He was creating a system of governance, so specific and so embedded in the legal documents, surrounding the family's wealth that no single heir, no matter how impulsive or unequipped, could make a decision large enough to collapse the whole thing. The machine had rules. The rules outlived him. And 170 years later, those rules are still running. Now we are moving into Generation 4, 5, and 6. And this is the territory where almost no family has ever been, which means almost no one ever talks about what it actually requires to get here. By Generation 4, your great-great-grandchildren are living inside something so old and so structurally embedded that the original founder, you, is a name on a document rather than a person they remember. And that distance creates a paradox that every multi-generational dynasty eventually has to solve. The wealth is impersonal enough to feel like it belongs to no one in particular, but personal enough that every family member feels entitled to it. That tension, if there is no governance structure to manage it, will tear apart families in ways that no outside force ever could. The families that reach Generation 6 and 7 solve this through something that sounds almost too simple. When you hear it, they give every generation a role in building something new, not just inheriting and managing what exists, but contributing something that will be there for the generation that follows them. Every heir is expected not just to preserve, but to add a new asset class, a new market, a new structure, a new business. The wealth is never treated as a finished thing. It is always treated as a living thing that requires cultivation from every person who touches it. This keeps the family psychologically connected to the process of building, not just the comfort of receiving. And that connection, that sense of responsibility to the generations that came before and the generations that will come after, is the invisible architecture underneath everything else. Without it, the legal structures are just documents. With it, they become something closer to a covenant. And now we arrive at Generation 7, the place this entire video was always moving toward. Imagine for a moment that you are sitting in a university library somewhere, and you are 20 years old, and you are studying finance because the family charter requires it. And on the shelf next to your textbooks there is a document. An old, carefully preserved letter, written in a handwriting you do not recognize, by a person who died before your grandparents were born. And in that letter, that person is writing to you, not to their child, not to their grandchild, to you specifically 7 generations forward, because they always intended to reach this far. And in that letter they are telling you that everything you have, the education, the assets, the legal structures, The family council, the governance documents, the freedom to study what you love and build what you want was not luck. It was architecture. It was a decision made by someone who understood that wealth without structure is temporary, and structure without values is fragile. But wealth built inside a structure governed by values and committed to perpetual growth is something close to permanent. That letter is the most important financial document in your family's history. And it was written not by an attorney, not by a financial advisor, but by the person who decided at the very beginning that this family was going to be different. That person can be you. Avasi, here is what I want you to take away from everything you just heard. Because this is the summary that matters. The families that build wealth across 7 generations are not smarter than you. They did not start with more than you have right now. What they did was make a different set of decisions, starting with the very first asset they ever acquired. They decided that asset was not a possession. It was the beginning of a structure. They decided that structure was not for them. It was for the people who would come after them. And they decided that the greatest act of love they could ever perform for their descendants was not to leave them money, but to leave them a system so well designed and so deeply embedded in legal and cultural architecture that the money would never stop working long after the person who built it was gone. That is what you are capable of building. Not tomorrow, not when you reach some imaginary number in your bank account, but right now, with the next decision you make about the next asset you acquire and how you choose to hold it. The first generation of every dynasty in history was once sitting exactly where you are sitting. Right now, without the structure, without the trust documents, without the family constitution, but with the decision in front of them about what kind of family they were going to create. You are Generation 1. The letter to Generation 7 starts today.